In Chicago and on the Great Lakes. But just how safe is the water people are swimming in this summer? Elizabeth Brackett reports.
The border collie chasing the ring-billed gulls at 63rd Street Beach isn't just playing, he's doing his job. The collie and his handler are on the beach from dawn to dusk to keep the gulls from leaving fecal matter on the beach that contributes to E. coli readings above the federal EPA standard of 235 colony-forming units, or CFUs, per 100 milliliters of fresh water.
So far this summer, we have had only 3 days where the water quality test came back over 235. That's compared to last year when there was 29 days. So we're very excited about the success of this program.
When E. coli levels are above 235, yellow advisory flags fly, though the advisory can also mean choppy water. Red flags are flown when levels hit 1,000 or water is very rough and swimming is banned. The Park District says water quality has improved at the beaches this year. Last year, swim bans were in effect 52 times, advisories 159 times. So far this year, 29 swim bans and 89 advisories. But a report just issued by the National Resources Defense Council paints a much different picture of Great Lakes water quality.
This year, the 18th year, we've published this report. The problems of contamination within the Great Lakes as a whole are beyond what the national average is. So there's a concern about last year's results indicating a persistent and growing problem within the Great Lakes with regard to bacterial contamination. And the Illinois beaches as a whole are among the most problematic within the Great Lakes.
The report says 8 Chicago beaches tested above the safe EPA standard at least 1/4 of the season in 2007. One of the biggest bones of contention is the Kathy Osterman beach behind me. The NRDC report says the beach exceeded the limits for E. coli 100% of the time last year. Park District says that's ridiculous. Like all Chicago beaches, it was tested at least 80 times, and only 12 times did it exceed E. coli limits.
The NRDC's report is a national report, and it takes a look at the beaches all across the nation. And so the idea that it inaccurately reports Chicago as having one of the worst beaches in the nation unfortunately paints Chicago in a pretty negative light, especially since that chart in the report is inaccurate.
Henderson says he is still waiting for the Park District to give him its data so any inaccuracies can be corrected. And he says the larger picture is more resources must be directed toward all levels of E. coli or bacterial contamination that cause beach closings.
If it's closed 20 times or it's closed 1 time, we've got an issue with regard to exposure to harmful bacteria. And we've got, if you are presented with the possibility of swimming in poo, you'd like to know about it, I think.
Both Henderson and Sargent agree that the current EPA standards for E. coli contamination are out of date and the testing too slow. When advisories or bans are posted now, they are from 2-day-old test results. The Park District is working on providing real-time data.
The predictive modeling system is out on the pier, and so what it's doing is it's measuring and it's sensing all of the water that's coming in as well as weather. So it's got water sensors that are testing the temperature of the water, the turbidity, the kind of the wave height, as well as the rainfall in the air, the wind that's coming through, and the temperature. And it's taking all of these different factors into consideration. It goes into a formula and then spits out the prediction of how much E. coli is actually washing into the recreational swimming water.
Sargent says the sources of pollution may be different at every beach.
The E. coli that's coming up on our beaches and showing up in our waters isn't from human waste. As we know, we've reversed the Chicago River, and that's where our sewage lines go. So the E. coli that we're seeing in Chicago is, from wildlife, it's from algae, it's from bacteria that grows in sand, it's from non-human sources.
And it's from a source the Park District has little control over: invasive species. This exhibit at the Shedd Aquarium is filled with models of one of the most damaging species ever introduced into the Great Lakes, the zebra mussel. And now its even more damaging cousin, the quagga mussel, has moved into the lakes.
They have an extremely prolific life cycle. They can reproduce 10,000 young at a time, up to 100,000 a year. Each individual female mussel can do that. So they can overtake a lot of areas. They're outcompeting all our native mussels and clams. And they're also gobbling up all the food that a lot of our plankton would eat that feed our fish. And then they also accumulate all the toxins that are in the water. And what they do is their waste sits along them in the bed, and algae grows on top of that, and you get these mats of algae that then lift off and end up on the beach.
What kind of shape are the lakes in now compared to what they were 10, 15 years ago?
To appearances, they seem like they're better. The water's clearer, and that's an effect of the mussels because they're filtering so much out. But in the long term, they're actually probably a little bit worse off.
So, even on a beautiful beach day, there are clouds over the future of the lakes that hold 90% of the fresh water in North America. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Elizabeth Brackett.
And back in a moment with a discussion I recently had with our Christian Farr. He has some things you should know about the digital transition that's coming.